son a samu nasara ta ɗinkewa a kuma samu a samu ci gaba ta fuskar harshe da adabi da al'ada tsakanin Najeriya da Nijar da kuma duk wasu ƙasashe, to ku rika komawa baya ku yi karatun tarihi yadda yake. Gidan sarautar Maradi, magajin Haladu ne ya tafi daga Katsina ya je kafa gidan sarautar Maradi. Daga nan al'ada da harshe da adabi sun yi tafiya sun je can. Da nike magana nan tare da ku, ɗan uwanku ne a ɓangare guda. Ni sunana Alhaji Sada Ruwa ɗan wairan Katsina, wadda ta haifi ɗan waira daga ƙasar Fafurruwa a garin Maraka. Aka auro ta aka zo da ita inda a lokacin babu boda, mafarin aka samu haihuwar ɗan waira da shi haifi wanda ya haife ni. Kun ga ɓangare na daga can yake. Akwai abubuwa na al'adu ƙwarai waɗanda ake aikatawa a gidan sarauta na sarkin Katsina Maradi. Ku ba da fifiko na haɗin gwiwa tsakanin 'yan jarida ku da marubutanku, yadda za a kasance tunanin da za a iya yi a ɗauko abin da ke jiya don mutanen da ke yau su sani su iya ajiye shi don gobe ta amfana. Don haka ina ganin in dai har ana son a samu nasara, to lallai a ba da fifiko matuƙa kan abin da ya shafi To, a ƙarshe abin da nake so ku sani, na je na kalli bikin gargajiya a kofar gidan sarki
daga firamare a Nijar. To gaskiya ba haka bane ba. Ni malami ne, ga kuma katina da Nijar aka rubuta shi. Idan ka je Zaria hilin Idi, akwai Annahada University. Muna yaye ɗaliban digirin farko, ɗalibai digiri na biyu, da masu PhD. Yanzu haka wasu sun amshi kwalayensu. Saboda haka an ci gaba da Hausa a Nijar. Daga ƙarshe kuma ina fatan wata rana tunda an ce international ne, to wannan taron a kai shi Nijar.
Assalamu alaikum. Tambaya ta ita ce, wane irin ƙalubale marubutan Nijar ke fuskanta ta hanyar kasuwancin littattafansu?
Mun gode. Assalamu alaikum. To ƙari za a yi muku. Shekarar 2000 JTZ, Tupec, UNESCO sun buga littattafai Hausa, Zarma, Fulfulde, Bambara, Tamashak. Ina cikin waɗanda suka samu dala 10,000 kyauta. Nijar ta samu dala 20,000, Mali ta samu dala 20,000 don bunƙasa adabi. Na so a ce tun da marubuta littafi ne za ku taɓo marubuta. Akwai Zainabu Gwandi, akwai Bubakar Hamma Bedi, akwai Hajiya Ummatu ya yi magana, akwai Malam Jafaru, akwai Rejeto, Major Rejeto, akwai su da yawa. Da kun faɗaɗa bincike amma ga ƙari. Nijar ta buga littattafai ƙarƙashin wata edition ga Shingo masu yawa, ɗaruruwa ba kaɗan ba. Wasu an kawo Najeriya mun buga. To wataƙila bincikenku zai ƙara don kusan cewa aikin da aka yi a ƙasar nan ba ƙarami ba ne. Yanda ake samun gudunmawa wajen buga littattafai a Nijar, to ina jin mu dai marubutan nan ba mu samu ba kamar yadda ake a can. Amma wanda suke a Yamai su nemi Dr. Malam Bako, shine Director Lang National a Ministry of Education. Akwai Bako shi kuma shine shugaba na wajen. Assalamu alaikum.
Akwai makaranta Annahada ba ƙarƙashin jagorancin gwamnati ba take. Makaranta ce mai zaman kanta. Mu kuma mun yi magana ne akan wannan karatun na Hausa na Bileng ya tsaya daga firamare ne a gwamnatance.
ita kuma annahada makaranta ce mai zaman kanta wanda wani ya buɗa. Sannan kuma kai tsaye mutum daga firamare ba zai je annahada ba sai in mutum ya gama karatun sakandare. Kenan matsalar dai da ke da kwai ɗin ita ce babu karatu na sakandare.
A ƙarin bayanin da zan dada a kan shi, kamar yadda ta ce a gwamnatance yadda mutum firamare sakandare har makarantar da ta sai sakandare babu shi a ita annahada a gwamnatance ne. Sannan kuma bangaren ƙarin haske da aka mana dama Hausa akan ce ilimi kogi ne, muna godiya sosai, za mu ƙara nutsawa da shawarwari akan hakan. Sannan kuma musamman a bangaren mutane kamar da muka faɗa suna ƙoƙari na rike adabi, to kamawa hukumominmu ne yadda zai tabbatu duba da ƙoƙarinsu a kama masa don abin ya samu ya haɓaka. Nan da ke da bambanci tsakanin ƙasar Nijar da Najeriya. Mutanenmu na ƙoƙari sai dai magabatanmu ba sa kamawa a hukumance, amma muna sa ran insha Allah da sauye-sauyen zamani za a samu ci gaba. Zan ba a cikin wani ya ansa tambaya akan kasuwancin littattafai na Hausa.
Dangane da ƙarin haske da aka yi mamu kamar yadda aka ce tahiya mabuɗin ilimi, tabbas tahiya mabuɗin ilimi ce, kuma an ce waiwaye adon tafiya ne. Insha Allah in muka koma za mu ƙara waiwayawa, mu bincike, mu tsananta bincike, sannan kuma da fatan kuma za mu samu goyon baya daga gare ku a sanar da mu abin da ba mu sani ba in mun zo nema.
Kasuwancin littattafai?
Tambayar ga faida da ta ce kalubalen da marubutan Hausa suke fuskanta a Nijar. A gaskiya muna kalubalen da ake fuskanta shine rashin sanin daidaitacciyar Hausa. In kuka duba yawanci din Nijar Hausar da muke yi babu irin Hausa da za a cewa tana cikin kare-karen daidaitacciyar Hausa. Ni ne idan na yi magana ana iya gane daga wani gari na rubuta, daga wani gari na hito ba daga Nigeria nake ba, amma idan na yi rubutu babu wanda zai ba da ina koda kaina ba haka. Idan na yi magana, idan na yi rubutu na ya bambanta kwarai gaske da magana ta. Kenan wannan kalubalen da muke fuskanta bai wuce na sanin ka'idojin rubutu ba, shine babban kalubalen da muke fuskanta. Don ko lokacin da zan fara rubutu wadda ta karɓa aminin gwiwa ta ce in yi rubutu, na ce mata ba zan iya ba, ni Nijar ne ke ban iya rubutu ba. Ta ce mini za ki iya, na ce mata wallahi ba zan iya ba. Ta ce mini za ki iya, je ki yi rubutu in gwada miki. To da haka ne muka yi. Kun gani babban dai kalubalen da muke fuskanta shine ka'idojin rubutu.
To kamar yadda baba gidan dabi da ya magana kan cewa akwai marubuta sosai a Nijar. To a gaskiya mu dai muna dan bubbincikawa kuma muna ta faɗi tashi na zagaye inda za mu samu mu kulla alaka tsakaninmu da su. To gaskiya zan iya cewa sun mamu nisa kamar yadda ake cewa sama ta yi wa yaro nisa. Ba mu san ta inda za mu kamo su ba ko dan mun yi ƙanana sosai ne, amma sannu dai muna bibiya ta yadda za mu yi har mu samu su. Muna ta bincike sosai, yanzu haka kafin mu zo mun dan tuntuɓi wasu, duk da a wasu lokuta an muka nema hanya ce dama ce ba mu samu wadda za mu kusanta da su, sai muke ganin kawai ba za mu iya ba. Amma sannu wata rana in kuka kama mu muna fatan wata rana mu je gare su.
Mun gode. Jazuli, Aisha, Rukayya, Amira, mun gode kwarai da Allah ya taba musu. Za ku tashi za a ɗauke ku hoto. Yawwa, mun gode kwarai. Sashi na gaba tattaunawa ne da za a yi da Turanci. Volunteers, please, can you take 2 seats away from the stage? The next session will be a book log. It will be a book chart. Please, you can take pictures down there at the installation. No? Okay, bismillah. 2 away here. Thank you very much. The next panel is going to be a book chat on the book, The Public Poet, a biography of Moody Speaking. I have two panelists for this session. So I will first of all invite the moderator. Please, can we have one room, please? Quiet, please. Thank you. I will invite the moderator for this session. It's none other than Mekudi Abubakar Zukogi, who lectures at the Department of English and Literary Studies at Bayero University, Kano. He's a literary and cultural academic as well as a writer. Please, a round of applause for him as he joins us. Our other esteemed panelist is none other than our teacher and our father, Professor Ibrahim Bello Kano, who is a professor in the Department of English, Bayero University, Kano. He has written and published extensively in many international journals, and he co-authored the book that we're going to be discussing together with Professor Atahiru Jega and Garba Said. The title of the book is The Public Poet, a biography of Moody Speaking. I will hand over the mic to Mahmoud Zukogi over the next 40 minutes to see what we can discuss in this book chat.
Assalamu alaikum. An ce za mu yi wannan tattaunawan a cikin harshen Turanci, amma za mu yi ƙoƙari mu ga mun yi tattaunawan a harshen Hausa insha Allah. Za mu yi ƙoƙari ko da sirki muna yi da Turanci insha Allah saboda jama'an da suke nan. Ko yalla ya jama'a kuna lura kuwa yau gashi aladunmu an juye ta, manyan abubuwa masu kyau da muke da su tun zamanin da yanzu an lalata. Manyan abubuwa masu kyau da muke da su tun zamanin da yanzu an lalata. Tun zamanin da nasara sadda ya bayyana, sha'aninmu aladunmu sun juye ta. Yau kaga ga dangi ba sani, ga ba su san tsakani suna da zumunta. Malam Moody Speaking. Allah ya ji kan mazan jiya, Allah ya ramshe shi. Jama'a, you are welcome to this segment of the Hibaf 2023, and za mu tattauna ne game da littafin da aka buga akan Malam Moody Speaking, wacce aka lakaba da suna The Public Poet, a biography of Moody Speaking. Today, za mu yi wannan tattaunawan da ni da babban malamina. Okay. Za mu yi wannan tattaunawan ne da babban malamina, mentor dina, colleague, it's my colleague, my friend and my brother, Professor Ibrahim Bello Kano. Kusan zan ce, ‘yan kaɗan ne a nan waɗanda ba za su san Professor Bello Kano ba. Professor Ibrahim Bello Kano is a household name in Bayero University, Kano. Wanda duk ya alarci Bayero University, Kano daga early 80s, mid 80s, zuwa 90s, da 2000, lalle kan zai san kowaye Professor Ibrahim Bello Kano. Professor ne na fannin adabi, kuma ya kware sosai a fannin literary theory and criticism. Yana da babban interest bangaren literary theory wanda ya yi disrupting orthodoxy, wanda ya challenging cewa ma'ana ko meaning da translation is settled. Saboda haka an fi saninsa a bangaren wani school of literary theory wanda ake malakabi da deconstruction. Ya shahara sosai a wannan fannin, kuma ya zama kaman authority a kan Jacques Derrida, Friedrich Nietzsche, Simone de Beauvoir, da dai irin sauransu waɗanda suka yi shahara akan falsafa da kuma harkan literary culture da philosophy. Ba da ɓata wani lokaci ba, saboda littafi ne wace littafi ne babba wanda ya tattaro tarihi na Malam Moody Speaking, wacce aka yi malakabi The Public Poet, a biography of Moody Speaking. Yana cikin waɗanda suka wallafa shi tare da Professor Atairu Jega da kuma Professor Asma'u Ji Said. Saboda haka ya kunshi abubuwa da yawa, amma saboda rashin lokaci za mu takaita wannan tattaunawar namu zuwa ga ababe guda 4 zuwa 5, insha Allah. Mun gode. All right. The Public Poet, a biography of Moody Speaking. Littafi ne wacce aka buga 2003. Mutane uku su suka yi editing ɗin wannan littafin. Professor Ibrahim Bello Kano yana cikinsu, Professor Atairu Jega da kuma Professor Asma'u Ji Said. Za mu fara da tambaya ta farko. Professor Bello Kano, a matsayinka wanda yake cikin waɗanda suka wallafa wannan littafin, kuma a irin karatun da kai ma shi Malam Moody Speaking na rubuce-rubucensa da kuma tarihinsa, za ka iya ba mu bayanin kowaye Moody Speaking? Na'am.
Assalamu alaikum. Gaskiya da na zo wannan gurin taron sai turanci na yi gudu. Da na shirya da magana da turanci, amma sai mai ɗaki na ga ta can ta ce wai ya haka ka zama kawar ka buga Hausa. To da Hausa zan magana, ina duburburce zan jawo turanci. Wato jama'a, shi Moody Speaking in ka ɗauki da Allah ya sunan poets da Hausa, an ka ɗauki mawaƙa na Hausa, gaskiya ya fita daban. Kun san akwai Sa'adu Zungur, akwai Aqilu Aliyu. Okay, that's the one who does that. He said we should speak in English. Okay, fine. Let's go on. Well, I've been asked to speak in English, and I hope all my English will come back as I speak. Anyway, this book was conceived at a time when some people thought that we should document the biographical trajectory of modern Hausa poets. And Moody Speaking was and is clearly one of them. You know, you heard about Sa'adu Zungur, and Akilu Aliyu, but Moody speaking stands out in one important respect. So when this book was being conceived, when we were planning for the book, it was decided that Professor Tairi Jega will handle the political aspect of it. Professor Said will look at the historical background. And I was asked to look at his poetry, analysis of his poetry and his relationship with his own politics. So that's what we did. Moody speaking was born in 1930 in Kano. Now if you look back, what was the 1930s in Kano? It was a time when colonial culture had arrived and was not taking roots as it took place in, say, Australia or other settler colonies. And there was a strong background of nativist tradition, the local tradition, the Islamic culture, the normative ways of traditional Hausa culture and Hausa ways of life, or Hausa life ways. So Moody speaking was precisely in that context when colonial culture by the 1930s, after 1903, was taking roots, bringing colonial modernity, or we say modernity. And then the traditional culture was there. And then also, after the Second World War, he was a young man then, he delved into politics. Now, what do you mean by this politics? Politics about debates about how society should be run. What should be the role of colonial institutions in Kano? How should native people select, adopt, or get rid of aspects of modern colonial culture? Now, all these poems, if you read them, they are here. There's a study of the poems. This book has an accompanying anthology by Mumbai House, written by two other professors about collection of his poems, so you can also go there. So it was in that context that Moody speaking became very important. Well, he had some formal education, up to what you might call today some secondary school education, which was very good at that time. People there are better educated than most people today. So he delved into that. And he also wanted to play a third role, the role of a poet. One, to understand Western culture and the extent to which we could accept parts of it and not. The second one was that he thought you can be a proper poet without participating in politics, because he was very active in NEPO. But he also knew that there were NEPO ideologues or anti-colonialist people who are writing in English, who are writing in Hausa Ajami, in Hausa, what do you call, Adabi. Thank you. Then he thought that he would do so from a special position, from the standpoint of poetry. Apparently, in our research, we found that Moody speaking was acquainted with classical Greco-Roman culture. The writings of Homer, the writings of Horace, people call him Horace, and some of the early like Pindar and so on. But amazingly, he read them, I think in English. Apparently there were no Hausa translations. So that's what makes him unique, different from, for example, Aliyu Akilu, or even Saad Zungur. Now, Moody speaking believed that the only way politicians can capture the imagination of the people is to use rhetoric. It wasn't taught in Hausa land. Rhetoric was not a subject in Hausa land at all. But for some reason, because when he died, we found that in his library, personal library, there are books from a variety of cultures, from Indian poets, Greco-Roman poets, early modern poets, even amazingly a poem by Matthew Arnold, which he wrote in the 1850s. So with this book brings out that more than many people think, Moody speaking was thoroughly a modern poet. What is that? What does it mean to call him a modern poet? He believed that the poet must have a public role in his community, and that the poet too must capture the imagination of his audience or his readers by deploying some of the best resources you find in poetry.
Okay, Prof.
Figures of speech and so on.
So, thank you, Prof.
Yeah.
I think Malam Moody speaking occupied a privileged position of being a part of the struggle for the emancipation of the Talakawa in northern Nigeria in the First Republic.
Yeah.
And he was also a poet.
That's right.
Now there was this thinking at that time that even though this group of young men, which includes the leader of the team, Malam Aminu Kano, Malam Moody speaking, Malam Abba Mekwaru, Malam Magaji Dambata, Malam Abubakar Zukogi, Malam Bello Ijimu. It was said that they were in the opposition, but their message was spreading very fast, was spreading like a wildfire in the Hamatan.
Yeah.
Why was it so? Was it because of the poets in the midst of these young intellectuals, revolutionary politicians? Because you have, beside, there was Malam Saadu Zungur, of course, before Malam Moody speaking. Now, if you have these people, what's this thing about literature and politics?
Yeah.
Do they have any nexus?
Yes.
Do they have any connection?
Absolutely.
Oh,
yeah, okay, let me respond quickly to this. You see, many people, you should get this. Many people didn't know really what Moody speaking was in his own private study or whatever. Now, Moody speaking was part of the 8 people that established NEPU, the Northern Elements People's Union. That eventually in NEPU is very well known. He was among the 8 you mentioned. And Moody speaking told the gathering then, it's all here, that the best way to capture the imagination of the people is to do politics and poetry both at once. So at every NEPU gathering, Moody speaking will be the first. Let me tell you something. There was a tradition of opening prayer in Hausa land at the time. Moody speaking will open with a poem which used poetic expression and a bit of the traditional religious openings. So there was every ASU meeting, every NEPU meeting was prestaged by Moody speaking, reading a poem and appealing to the people not to be lazy, to rise up and say no to oppression and to participate in politics. So let's say that Moody speaking, we claim in this book, Moody speaking was one of the first traditional artists to believe that you can't do politics without poetry or poetry without politics. He had a public sense of poetry. That is to say, poetry should have a role in the lives of the people, in mobilizing them. And Moody speaking was the first, before any political scientist in northern Nigeria, to believe in political participation. If you go to political science, you see this political participation, voting behavior. Moody speaking started it, and all his poems, all of them, no exception, except one. His magnum opus called Wasiya Spikia, but I'll keep that aside. All of them were about provoking the resistance of the people, getting the people to oppose native authorities or nativist or native institutions, their alliance with colonial forces. And so I venture to say, we say it here, without Moody speaking, NEPU would have had very little success at the time it did.
Thank you very much, Prof. This is a very interesting response. Now, Malam Moody speaking has written on different subjects: politics, culture, and literacy also. Especially, he wrote extensively on the erosion of the traditional Hausa culture by the European culture. This is very prominent in his writing. And then, of course, also his political poems. Now, Prof, would you speak to us about Malam Modi Speaking's revolutionary poetics?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. There's something I need to say right away, since people have not read this book. It is this. People didn't, well, some people might know that he was chairman of the Kano Agency for Mass Education. Modi Speaking thought that given the low level of literacy in northern Nigeria in English, in Roman letters, not in Ajami, not in a religious teaching, no, that his poetry would, most of his poetry ask people to be literate, to attend literacy classes, and to see literacy as part of the way by which, as opposed to emancipation from colonial culture. And also, Modi Speaking said, and this is something I think you need to hear, Modi Speaking gave a paper at BUK, Center for the Study of Nigerian Languages, in which some scholars argued that Hausa people borrowed their rhyming scheme or their rhythmic structure from the Arabs. Modi Speaking wrote a paper, we are reproducing here, in which he denied that. Modi Speaking said, people like Dongwairo, all the traditional Hausa poets, arrived at their rhyming scheme independently of Western or Arabian or whatever culture. That made him very unpopular with some scholars. Secondly, as I have said before, Modi Speaking would not think of a poet without a political sense, a sense of his political mission to mobilize the people, to get them to be literate, and to get them to appreciate the craft of poetry. He established the Hikima Club. You call it, he didn't want to use the English word club. He established the Hikima Club, and it was a collection of young poets, apprentices, and they were given hours on Radio Kano, Northern Nigerian Broadcasting Service. And he was tutoring, he was mentoring young poets to do three things. To take stance about Western culture. Modi Speaking did not believe that all of Western culture is bad, no. He said there are many aspects of Western culture we should embrace. Curiosity, literacy, even politics. And the need to say, this part of modernity is good, we should domesticate it. He said that if you didn't do that, you will not fight, you will not be able to fight colonial culture. That's one. Number two, that you can do politics. Malamin Kano could appeal to the masses, but you should do it in the kind of language that people understand, and one of them was poetic expression. There's a chapter here which I wrote, okay, maybe I shouldn't say that, about, amazingly, people would not believe that Modi Speaking was conversant with Greco-Roman poetry, with the Romantics, Wordsworth, Byron, Shelley, and so on. People didn't know that until he wrote this book. And he finally said that the only way a poet can be relevant is to participate in modernity, and also to participate in local politics, international politics, and use poetry to bridge the two gaps. That is his relevance today.
Thank you, Prof. I think if you look, if you have studied Modi Speaking, you will realize that he wrote a response, if you like, to Malan Saadu Zunguru's Arewa Jamhuriya ko Mulukiya. And then in his own response, he says he wrote a poem which he titled Arewa jamhuriya kawai. So if you look at that poem, it conscientized the masses to kick against the monarchy and the native authority system, and that earned him prison sentence. So many of them were in prison several times in the course of that period. Now, would you say that that poem in particular was one poem that has energized and conscientized the Talakawa to rise against the...
Exactly.
Thank you.
My audience, here is a part of our chapter. It's called The Battle of Symbols. Here it is on page 119, The Battle of Symbols. So Modi speaking didn't just attack in that poem, Jumhuriya Kawai. He didn't simply attack Saadu Zunguru. Saadu Zunguru was a mystical figure. I think they respected him. He was really a great guy. So he wrote a poem. That poem he wrote, a great guy. Well, we are speaking Hausa, not Hausa. I don't know what to call the Professor Mustafa is the Battle of Symbols. I don't know how to translate in the Hausa. Modi speaking argued that the best way to handle his response was that we should use poetic symbols. Now he turned Mulukia or Jumhuriya, monarchy or republicanism. And so he went and read up debates in England of the time. Somebody called the guy who wrote The Age of Reason, Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine wrote a book called The Age of Reason, in which he took refuge in America, in which he devastated the whole idea of a monarchy, unelected ruler, a monarch. So in that poem, Modi speaking argues that actually, look around, one way by which you can undermine colonial culture is to refuse to accept the monarchy. And the monarchy in England, the Queen and the Windsor and the the Windsor family and so on. So he said the one quickest way of doing that is to align poetry with republicanism. Poetry is democratic. You can tell the poet what to write. You may censor the poet, but the poet too may say things using symbols that you may not understand. So he said the best way to achieve republicanism is to also use poetry to show that monarchy will be a perpetuation of colonial culture. Republicanism will be the people themselves deciding how they want to live. They vote for their own destiny. And that is how Modi speaking undermines Saad Zunguru's way by calling it the battle of symbols. Ayipada, I don't know. So Ayipada, what do you call poetry in Hausa? No, Mustafa is helped me. He calls it the device, the literary device, like tortoise, metaphor, onomatopoeia, and so on. I don't know how to translate it. His argument was that symbols will decide the fight, not terms like republicanism or monarchy, but the symbols, freedom, the right to vote, the right to participate in politics will undermine monarchy. And poetry is in that struggle.
Thank you, Prof. Now let's come to, poets, writers always have what we call, writers are always asked which one of their writings they consider the best. Now, for Mamman Shata, for instance, he has said repeatedly that his best song is Bakandemia. In English, we refer to poems or songs, Bakandemia, which is just one of the best masterpieces of Shata, as magnum opus. Magnum opus. Yeah. Now, We have realized also that Malamudi speaking has what we may call a magnum opus, which is Wasiya Sipikia. Now, would you like to speak to us? What are the silent imports of the poem Wasiya Sipikia, Prof?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. In 1958, Moody Speaking wrote a poem called Wasiya Sipikia. So I translated it into, okay, you want to help me, Prof, you want to help me with the, okay. He wrote this in 1958 called Wasiya Sipikia. Let me, Ismail Bala, who is here, Ismail Bala, he participated in the translation called Speaking's Will, W-I-L-L. Not the modal verb, but the will, meaning testament. So let's call it Moody's Testament. But listen, this is the shocking thing about the poem. This is the Hausa version, and my translation, with the help of Ismail Bala, who is sitting there. I think Ismail Bala, you are there. Okay, it says, this is the poem. I'm giving you, we don't have time to read it. It's here. He says, he wrote a poem as a couplet or couplet. Two lines per stanza, in which he says he invokes God, he prays to God to let him die in his own bedroom, in his own bed. But before he dies, all his relatives and friends will gather around the bed, and then he will read to them his own will, W-I-L, his testament. One, everybody must be there. So please think about this. Do you choose when to die? Do you choose where to die? So he says in his bedroom, in his bed, and he will not die until all his relatives are there, surrounding his bed. Then he will tell them his will, his testament. Okay, do this, do that. He said when he dies, he should be quickly buried. He should be quickly buried. He should be taken to his grave. And that nobody should shed a tear. And that they shouldn't even pray. You know, there's a tradition that when somebody dies, you sit by the grave and say, may God forgive him, may God. He says, no, just go about your business. And he doesn't want the usual sitting, the morning sitting by relatives for 3 days. Sadaqah, the ta'ziyah, he doesn't want that. So, Makoki, that, look, imagine this, just think about this. You want to die, but you don't choose, you will not die until everybody is around. Then you say, you tell them, let me say this, my mother always prays that she will do the Indian death. In Indian movies, somebody is shot, and he said, everybody will come, and then he will say, he will give his instruction to the whole, and then he will say, woo, and then say, but yeah. Buddha speaking, wanted to die at his own time, of his own choosing. And he will not die until all the relatives are on both sides of the bed. Then he will tell them what he expects them to do. Then he will die. And then when he dies, he should be taken to the grave in the quickest possible way. No prayer, no lamentation, no crying, no moving, no mourning. So that is his magnum opus. But I say in my analysis, Ismail Bala and then one other guy in ABU, we said people don't die like that. So we use the device of prosopopia. Prosopopia is a technical Latin term that makes even death itself, like in, what do you call this? I don't know, anyway, let's forget it. So prosopopia is a device by which a poet who doesn't want to die claims that he wants to die. And by writing that poem, Moody Speaking was looking not for mortality, but immortality. Moody Speaking knew, and he wanted to live forever, not as a living, breathing person, but as a figure of speech, as a prosopopia. And so that is it. So it's his magnum opus. Wasiya Sipikia, Moody's Testament. But that poem, this poem, is beautiful. You need to read it. And our translation took care of that. We also reproduced the beauty of the verse, the formal pattern, the syntactic structure, and the rhyme scheme. And so, Moody speaking has died in the body, but he's not dead. He lives as a figure of speech in his own poem. And that's exactly what he wanted. So shall we call him a hypocrite? No. We say, this is the classical poet who wants to go on as a figure of speech.
Thank you, Prof. One last thing is Malam Moody speaking may not have extensive formal education.
Yes, yes.
But for him and his contemporaries, the highest qualification they've had was the middle school.
Yes.
They didn't have the opportunity to go to the university to earn a degree. But they have read extensively.
Of course.
They have read great works of philosophers.
Yes,
and you could see that exhibiting in whatever they do, especially for Malam Moody. Most of his poems were about enlightening the society, particularly about the culture of superstitions. He has written that in his poems about believing in fatalwa, about Sheng Inna. It appears to be more scientific in his writing, in his poem.
Yeah.
And I think that greatly helped in the education of the people about embracing the modern ways of life, especially going to the hospital, the pregnant woman going for maternity, and also to discourage this idea of the superstitious beliefs in Hausa society. I think you may want to add to that.
Yeah, let me add that Moody speaking was self-educated largely. You know, he went to London to participate in the conference on Nigeria in the 1950s, 1955, 56, 57. He was there. And amazingly, you know, during the interview, Moody speaking could speak fluent English. He attended the middle school, Shahuchi, and the middle schools around at that time, which were, the teachers were British. And so learning English was quick, was easy. And another thing is this. You rarely find people today that self-educated because most people don't know. Moody speaking had a personal study. Just before his death, I think a year or 2 or 3 before his death, we went to his house in Fage. And we went, he was in the upstairs in one of the first floor in the house. And so he was not very well, but he said, Ibrahim, wait for me. He went down and came back with a book. You know, whoever attended university in the 70s and 80s and studied poetry, there was a fat book, Understanding Poetry. I think you can recall, some of the older people will know, Understanding Poetry, that fat. He had the book, and he said that looking back at his life, looking back at his own previous life, he said that, so this is shocking, I think you should hear this. He said that it was poetry, or the craft of poetry, that made him modern. He was not Western, he was not Eastern. You know, he denied that Hausa people learn their rhythmic and rhyming structure from the Arabs. He denied that. He said that every poem will have illa. Illa means defect. Illa, right? I don't know, translate, help me please. Professor, you are there. Illa, I think that's defect. So it says every poem has an illa, has a defect. Where the rhyme scheme fails to be, where the internal rhyme could not be had because of the structure of the language. He said that, and this is shocking everybody, Moody speaking said that he was taught by poetry. And so having been taught by poetry, he taught in poetry. And he said that Kano people, Nigerians should be both anti-colonial and modern, and poets and political agents in political participation. So you don't find any poem. Let me tell you that if you look at modern poets today in Nigeria, they're always talking about corruption, military rule, and so on. But you hardly find in Nigerian poetry or poems what is the English word? Give me the adjective, please. A close attention to aesthetics or to the poetic structure or the rhetorical structure of poetry. Buddha speaking was not of that kind. So that's where his genius lies. That's why his genius lies.
Thank you.
That he could give poetry a public, like the Greco-Romans, a public role, and poetry also as another form of politics.
Thank you, Prof. Professor Ibrahim Bello Kano. Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. Okay. Please, can we give Professor Ibrahim Bello Kano a round of applause? Quickly, we will take 1 or 2 or 3 questions. Part of the question is we would want to get someone who can read a line or 2 or 3 lines from Malam Moody's Wasiya Spikia in Hausa, please. Ismail Bala, can you do that?
Ismail Bala, will you like to read this? Yes.
Yes, okay.
No, it's a beautiful poem
Right.
in Hausa. And then we have the translation. I did with Ismail. So here it is, Ismail. You want to read the Hausa or the English? No. The English version, the English translation is there.
Wasiya Spikiya a 1958. Ta'ala ina roƙonka ranar da zan cika, ka sa in cika Allah cikin ɗakina, gaban duk iyalaina da 'ya'ya da 'yan uwa, Allah ina roƙonka sai a gidana. Idan na cika ku 'yan uwana gaya muku, da kun ji cikawa ta ku taru gidana. Idan har da rana abin ya zama ko cikin dare, batun jinkiri kadda ya samu wajena. Idan an yi sallah an gama kar a dakata, a ɗauka kawai hanya zuwa kabarina. Idan aka je da zuwa a sa ni ciki kawai, cikin hankali domin tuno lamarina. Ƙasar kabarin kuma kar a ware daban-daban, a tura gaba ɗaya duk ta watsu a kaina. Idan aka ƙara gini da an tashi an gama, ku koma wajen harkar ku ya jama'a na. Batun sadakar 3 ko 7 ko ta 40 kaza shekara wallahi babu ruwana. Idan masu kuka da ihu da razana, don Allah na roƙe ku kar ku yi kaina. Idan tausayinku kwarai zuwa gun jana'iza, kaza wahalar tafiya hakan kabarina, kaza wahalar wanka da ɗauko ni don zuwa cikin makara tafiya zuwa ƙarshe na. Hakika a ranar da iko da zan iya hakan kabari da sai in yo da kaina. Ta'ala nake roƙo ya gare ku duk, ya sa tausayi a wajen dukkan jama'a na. A nan zan tsaya domin wasiyar tamu ta tsaya. Moody speaking ne, uba ga Amina.
Hey, please note the rhyme. Na. Oh, you had it go? Now English cannot do it. Because now, one syllable, you hardly find one syllable in that sense. But I don't know about the Latinate other languages. That's a masterpiece. And if you listen, he also has what is very difficult. We call it internal rhyme. There is end rhyme, but he has a consistent internal rhyme up to the end of the poem. And he ends with who he is, the father of Aminago. Yeah, but that's why we say that actually by writing that poem, he was seeking, even if unconsciously, an immortality, not mortality. And in Hausa Muslim culture, the funeral he is asking for cannot be given. It's not possible. How can you die when everybody is around? Then you say, oh, I'm dead. As you see in the movies, somebody is shot and he gives blah, 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 and say, then suddenly, having said everything, he will do this, and then he dies, and so on. So, Buddha speaking wanted to live forever in his poetic craft.
Thank you, Professor Ibrahim Belakano. Quickly, yes? Okay.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. I would like to make my contribution in English, but I think it will be better communicated if I speak in Hausa. So with your permission. Okay.
Come closer, please.
Sorry? Should I come out?
Come closer. There's Dean at the back.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Okay.
Prof, thank you very much for your presentation on this book. Sai dai abinda akwai abubuwa da yawa, amma zan takaita musamman akan ita wannan wasiya sifiqiya. Yau akwai abubuwa da yawa, na karanta wannan littafin, na kuma karanta paper da Malam Ismail Bala ya rubuta akan ta dai. Na ga abubuwan da aka faɗa da kuma abin da professor yanzu ya faɗa. To akwai abubuwa da gaskiya ya kamata mu duba a ciki. Shekaran da Malam Moody Speaking ya rubuta waƙar, da context din ma'ana yanayin da ake ciki. Ya rubuta ta a 1958 lokacin a shekara 28. Da yake cewa ta'ala ina roƙonka ranar da zan cika, ka sa in cika Allah cikin ɗakina. In an fahimci context din, a lokacin yana bursin ana ta kama su ne. Da haka baya so ya mutu a bursin ne. Yawwa, ba wai yana so lalle sai abin da ba wai yana nufin literal aiki ba. Allah ka sa in mutu domin me? Duk wanda aka ce ya mutu a bursin, to fito da shi ma a yi mishi jana'iza wani jidali ne. Sai wataƙila sai abin da yake faruwa ga gawa ya faru. Wannan ce bai so. Sannan idan muka taso duk abin da yake faɗe, akwai rigima da aka yi, ishu na zaman makoki, addu'ar sadaka 3, sadaka 40, sadaka 7. Ko wanda ya karanta infiraji za mu ga magana da Ali na Mangeki ta yi. To wani theological issues ne a lokacin. Da ƙasa akwai a ƙasa suna raba ta gida biyu. Akwai 'yar ciki, akwai 'yar waje. To mu ɗauka magana ta farko, Moody Speaking ba Tijjani ne. A Tijjaniyan ma yana bin makarantar Salga. A Kano akwai Salgawa, akwai Madabawa. Moody Speaking mutumin Salga ne. Makarantar Malam Salga ita ce yake intisabi da ita. Su kuma suna da da'awa ta cewa ba zaman makoki, ba sadakar 3, ba sadakar 7, ba sadakar 40. Duka wa'annan na haka abubuwa ne mazhabar shi ce a lokacin shi yake so a ɗabbaka ta a kansa. Da shi kanshi magana ta kuka, hadisi ya tabbata duk wanda aka zo ana niyaha a kan shi, ana wannan ihun, za a yi mishi azaba da wannan. Shine yake cewa kada shi a yi masa batun sadakar 3 ko 7 ko ta 40, kaza shekara wallahi babu ruwana. Irin masu kukan nan da ihu da razana, dan Allah na roƙe ku kar ku yi kaina. To in muka fahimci context din, matsala ce theological a lokacin. Akwai wayannan ko in firaji a karanta yana ta magana mai gumaza jahili ne, an fi suwa ne duk yayi ta wannan yana kwandamin har akan mace yake cewa ko kamar mutuwar uwa ne sai ta hankura ko uba ne, ko a ce wani dan uwa ne in ta je wani magani ne za ta musu ba kururuwa ba. Magana yake ko baban mace ne ya mutu ba sai ta je gidan mutuwar ba, in ta je za ta dawo da shi ne ba ta dawo da shi ba. To sai mun fahimci context din, shine za mu fahimci me Malam Moody Speaking. Duna karanta na ga wanda kuka yi musamman ko a ciki.
Barrister, thank you. Thank you very much. Lala, please let me quickly, Barrister, you are saying something very intelligent. I agree with you, but in literary theory, in literary studies, we have 4 grids: author, text, context, and reader. So if you are to follow you, we'll be doing literal analysis. In literary studies, we are metaphorical. We deploy metaphors. We refuse to go to reality, we go to the figures. We privilege metaphor and synecdoche and so on rather than simply, but you are right. A historian will say what you have just said. But as a literal critic, we said he has used prosopopia, which has no need for reference to context, but to the poetic expression, but to the poetic craft, and to literariness. So thank you very much. But in our own, there are many ways of approaching a poem: contextual, reader-based, author-based, text-based. Thank you very much.
All right. Last question. Babu. Babu, go. We have Dr. Alia. Yeah, she's raising her hand, please. Can you say something?
She doesn't have...
Oh, no? Okay.
So thank you very much, Professor Ibrahim Bellakano, Madam Mahmoud Zukogi. Please, a big round of applause for them for this history lesson. If we stand for pictures, please.
Okay.
We'll go straight to the next panel, which we are hoping to also be the masterpiece or Bakandemia of this festival. We are gradually coming to the end of the festival. Shh. Thank you. The next panel is going to be in Hausa, and we are going to discuss the Kano diaspora. Sashi na gaba za a yi magana ne akan 'yan kaka gidan ƙasar Hausa. Zan gayyaci wanda zai jagoranci wannan sashe. Malam Nasiru Wada Khalil manazarci ne a fannin al'adu da ɗabi'un 'yan adam, musamman al'adun da suka shafi sarautar ƙasar Kano, kuma shi zai jagoranci wannan sashe. Da Allah mu tawa Malam Nasiru Wada Khalil. Malam Nasiru na kusa? So mutane sun ce wannan panel din suke jira. So nan da minti 10 mutane za a je a yi sallan magariba, sai mu dawo 6 da minti 20 sai a ɗauki wannan panel din. Minti 10 dan Allah.